Okay, I want to cover one small little tidbit here. Um, in my job that I find myself now, so neat. Definitely given by God. He told me many years ago that I would be making my income, my earnings, by many different sources, not just one particular avenue. Which many people have said for a long time that I'm all over the place. Pick one thing and stick with it and hone in on it and make it your craft and you'll be successful. That just really hasn't ever worked for me. And when I can connect on an emotional level with someone, be it a child or a friend or a relative, um, that pretty much is my driving force. And I believe that I can connect that in all of the genres that I'm interested in, all of the venues that I partake in, as you can as well. So if you are a relational person, not everybody is. There are definitely personality types out there, but a relational person where you're concerned about the advocacy of others, yourself, always looking for betterment in yourself and others, then you might relate well to this story. So I wanted to share because this really hit home for me. There was a little boy that I was working with in one of the elementary schools, and he has a lot of the behavioral characteristics that do indeed line up with trauma of past at a very young age. So when I first came onto the scene, one of the other teachers had said, "Wow, he saw something in you. His mouth gaped open like he was a deer in headlights when you first came into the room." And this was after the day that I had spent with him. So throughout the day, he was very candid, speaks on a genius level, which we find with a lot of students these days that have, a prognosis of autism or the like. Again, definitely another subject. So he said to me, "I heard two teachers talking to each other." And I'm like, "Okay." And he said, "And one of them cussed." And I'm like, "Oh, okay." "And were they cussing at you or cussing at each other?" He's like, "No, but don't you think that teachers should not be allowed to cuss?" And I'm like, "Okay, tell me why." He's like, "Because that changes everything." And I'm like, "Well, what does that change for you? You're telling me the story. I'm concerned about how it affects you. What does it change for you?" And he's like, "Well, I viewed this teacher as being someone, you know, that was representing her job. And how can she be a good teacher if she talks like that?" And I'm like, "Oh, and what does that say about you?" And he looked at me and he's like, "Well, it doesn't say anything about me. It's her problem." He was very irate at this point, which I totally get. I love it when they share that emotion because kids don't conjure up emotion. If they're expressing themselves, they have a real need that they probably can't put words to, and if it's a familiar thing, they're going to react because their little minds are saying, "Doesn't feel good, doesn't feel good, something's wrong, something's wrong." And if they're not able to trust the adult that they're talking to, you're not going to get an accurate response. So he said, "Well, I was deceived. It tells me that I believe this person was someone that that I thought they were, and they were presenting themselves, differently to me." And I'm like, "Oh, I get that. I totally get that." That is a classic response from someone that has not had their basic trust needs met when they were children. Maybe they have to come into the atmosphere and feel, sense, and know all the time what's going on. They have to check out if their body is getting hot or if the atmosphere is giving off hostility or chaos, or if it's okay to let your hair down and act yourself. That comes with fine tuning of hypervigilance. Later on in life, that plays out as stress big time. It gives all kinds of invitation to every kind of sickness, especially the autoimmune deficiencies, and dare I even say cancer. That is a real deal. But this child is before me, and when he said that, it clicked with me, and I knew exactly the pain that he was speaking from. Because if you can't trust even yourself, because maybe boundaries have been violated, or no one has even lent an ear to hear your side of the story, and maybe go as far as they've disbelieved you entirely, it's from that place that a child is looking to be led, as we all honestly are looking to be led. This child is looking for a confidant, a reliable source that says, I get you, I hear you, you're not alone, it is not your fault. Big time. That's the 5-finger deal. You gotta present that to anybody that's exhibiting this emotional upheaval, that's saying, well, I thought this person was this. And I hear it in church. I was at a healing conference when one of my friends would not move, like wouldn't move the seat over, and I had another stranger, but was at the conference, came over to me and she's like, what kind of Christian was that? I want to ask you. You saw the whole thing and da-da-da. And all I did was recognize the clues. Okay, this person's reacting because she feels she's witnessed an injustice. It has personally affected her in some way, and she's demanding justice. She's demanding to be heard. So I listened, and I'm like, I understand. You could ask him, kind of in this setting, why don't we give it to Daddy right now? Like, I don't have the answers for you, but maybe he does. We can't really do that in a public setting. You can't do it in a business setting all the time. But I do believe times are changing. I believe, doors have opened up for me already with business consulting on a very spiritual level where, you want my advice, I'm going to bring to the table Daddy. I'm inviting him. He's saying, first, deal with it emotionally. What is this not meeting in your life? And then ask yourself, what are you believing? So it goes back to how you run your business, how you run your household, how you run your life. And when little children can say, I thought that this person stood for this, and then I believe now that I was deceived, those are clues. When you're seeing people make demands, I don't really care, get it done, it's my way or the highway, those are clues. When your boss is really not doing what they're supposed to be doing, and suddenly you have this extra load on your shoulders, and then you get yelled at from somebody else because you misunderstood. Dare I say you look stupid? My goodness. If I had $1 for every time somebody thought I looked stupid on a job site, I could write a book on that. So these are all very interesting little things that we come across throughout our daily relationships on any given day. And I'm just encouraging you, pay attention. How are you going to always ask yourself or bring back a person that you're connecting with, bring them back to, how does this make you feel? Does God say that about you? Does God say that you're deceived? You're always going to be deceived and you can't trust anybody? I know you can trust him. And with this little boy in particular, I said, you know what? You don't really even know me. But I'll take that anger for you. You believing that you were deceived. Why don't you put it in my hand? Why don't you give it to me? And he looked at me with as much rage as he could muster, and he said, you couldn't contain all my anger. And I'm like, because you've been really hurt and you haven't been able to trust anybody. Well, you know what? I'm not God, but you give it to me and I'm going to give it to God. And I know he can handle it. And he grabbed my hand and he squeezed it. His face was getting blood red. And he was like, you feeling it? I'm like, yeah, I'm feeling it. It's okay. Lay it on me. Bring it on. And after about 5 minutes, and I mean, it was a long clench because it was at recess. Free time. And he went and talked with a friend or whatever and came back 5 minutes later crying. And he's like, I need your hand again. And I'm like, well, it's here. I'm willing to give it. So as a church, if we can bring ourselves out from a membership of a certain denomination or from an agenda and just present ourselves to other people how we would want to be treated. What does this person need? If I'm mean to myself, I may not stop and pause to think about what this other person needs. Well, there's another clue. What do you need? If you're on an airplane and you're about to hit the waters, big old crash on the scene, and you're the adult, they're going to tell you to put that mask on your face first, and then you assist the children. That's not for the sake of any other reason except for You're the one that has to be cognitively making decisions for the benefit of others. So whether you're a CEO, or you're a foreman, or you're a manager, or you're a mom, or you're a dad, or you're a teacher, or anybody else in the service industry, you being you might be the very hand that somebody needs to hold in order to stop believing lies that they're telling themselves. Because it's not truth that we are deceived. And if we are being deceived in any incident, any scenario, the Lord promises that He will always reveal His truth, that light will always expel darkness. And I just want to share that with you. It's stories that, happen to all of us, and we might think are insignificant, might pass it off as just another day. But you matter. And what you say and do for somebody else, childlikeness is in all of us. We each have a child within. Some of us need to get in touch with that child. So be kind to yourself in this season. Let it start something new.